Boker Tov, my friends, so good to be with you this morning as we continue our journey through the Omer. Today I'd like to begin with the words of Elohai N'shama. Thank you, God, for restoring my breath, for restoring my soul, and for giving me this beautiful day. Elohai, Elohai N'shama Shenatata bi tehorai Elohai, Elohai N'shama Try that again. Shenatata bi tehorai Tabarata, Atabarata, Atayatarta, Atanefakta bi Beata N'shama Bekirbi Elohai, Elohai N'shama N'shatabi tehorai. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, shaped it, breathed it into me, and protect it within me. Today, we are continuing on our journey. Our journey, the 7-week counting of the Omer, from awakening to the realities of our world, to setting out on a journey, from entering the wilderness to being in the unknown. And this week of being in the unknown, we've spoken about a variety of texts relating to strength and fortitude and being able to find the resilience that we need in a place of uncertainty. But today we're going to be learning about something that God gave to us in the desert that taught a lesson of faith, of believing in ourselves and our future. But in order to go into that, we need to say our blessing for counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat ha'omer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with mitzvot and commands us concerning the counting of the Omer. Hayom shisha v'esrim yom shehem shlosha shavuot v'chamisha yamim la'omer. Today is 26 days, which is 3 weeks and 5 days of the Omer. And for everyone who's been joining every day in this counting of the Omer, we are more than halfway to our journey to Mount Sinai, and how wonderful that blessing is. I want to thank you, everyone who is here today, who I can see. I want to thank everyone who I can't see too. I just can't say your name out loud. So good morning to Andrea and to Elliot, to Jay and Don, Diane and Pam, Carrie and Sarah, Michelle and George, Susan and Debbie, Tom and Marla, Bonnie and Eve. It is so good to be with every single one of you and everyone else who is here joining later in the day, or who I simply can't see because of the Facebook algorithms. But this becomes so much more sacred because we can do it in community. Today, I'm going to bring in what seems like a little bit of a longer text because I want to talk about a symbol that was so important. And this shows up right after the Exodus, right after the Israelites leave Egypt, and they're walking around in the desert. Of course, we know about the story of the water that was bitter and how it became sweet. But the Israelites were also grumbling because they didn't have enough food and began to say, why don't we just go back to Egypt? At least there we had things to eat. Just ready to turn around at the first challenge. But God responds to this challenge. And God speaks to Moses and says, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Speak to them and say, by evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. You shall know that I, the Eternal, am your God. In the evening, quail appeared and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a fall of dew about the camp. When the fall of dew lifted, there, over the surface of the wilderness, lay a fine and flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, that is the bread that the Eternal has given you to eat. This is what the Eternal has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you requires to eat. And Omer, an important word there, an Omer to a person for as many of you as there are. Each of you shall fetch for those in his tent. And the Israelites did so, some gathering much, some little. But when they measured it by the Omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no deficiency. They had gathered as much as they needed to eat. So you might wonder, what is this word Omer that's here? Of course, we've been counting the Omer for almost 4 full weeks now. An Omer is a measurement, a unit by which they measure grain, but here it's also being used for this bread, this funny bread that is given to the Israelites, this bread that is called manna. We'll go back to that idea of the Omer in just a moment, but I want to bring us a little further into the text, because there is this idea that's going forth to not leave any of it over until morning. What the Israelites are gathering is exactly what it is that they need for just one day. Except the Israelites paid no attention to Moses. Some of them left it until morning. It became infested with maggots and stank. And on the 6th day, they gathered double the amount of food, 2 omers for each. And when all the chieftains and community came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Eternal meant. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Sabbath of the Eternal. Bake what you would bake and boil what you would boil, and all that is left put aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside until morning as Moses had ordered, and it did not turn foul, and there were no maggots in it. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is the Sabbath of the Eternal. You will not find it today on the plain. 6 days you shall gather it. On the 7th day, the Sabbath, there shall be none. So what is going on here? There is this idea that God is giving the Israelites food every single day. And yet, there is no way to safeguard and preserve that food. Every single day, they have to wake up in the morning filled with hope and faith and trust that there will be food tomorrow. We can understand why the Israelites rebelled a little bit and tried to hold on to some of that manna in hopes that some of it might be good tomorrow, because how could they trust that they would have food? They knew what it was like to suffer. They didn't want to suffer anymore. And so we can understand this idea of safeguarding, this idea of wanting to just have something that is assured, that they will have something the next day that they can preserve and know with absolute certainty that they will have this food for them tomorrow. And yet God is challenging them and saying no and making this manna not good for the next day. God is challenging them to live in the uncertainty, to live in the unknown, to come to terms with vulnerability. As the text goes on, and this is the last piece I'm bringing in, the house of Israel named it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and it tasted like wafers and honey. Moses said, "This is what the Eternal has commanded. Let one omer of it be kept throughout the ages, in order that they might see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness, and that I brought you out from the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar, put one omer of manna in it, and place it before the Eternal to be kept throughout the ages. As the Eternal had commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the pack to be kept. And the Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to a settled land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. All throughout their journey in the wilderness, all 40 years that they were wandering through, it is this manna that sustained them. Every day in the desert, they lived with uncertainty. And indeed, in our own lives, we too have to cope and live in uncertainty. And yet, it's not a comfortable place for us by any means. I think very often we like to put that thought out of our minds of how vulnerable we are. That thought that we don't know how much time we have. We don't know if today is our last. And so we have to make the very most of every single one of our days. This is something that we try not to think about, where um, there are so many ways in which we, as a culture, try to put this thought away from our mind. This past year, part of the challenge of the pandemic has been, for many of us, that we've had to deal with that uncertainty. We've watched as loved ones or friends have died from COVID-19, far too many. We've had to worry about our own health and safekeeping. And that's really, really challenging. But there can also be a strength in recognizing the preciousness of life, recognizing our vulnerability, coming to terms with it, and turning it, instead of something to be feared, into something of blessing, where we try to make the most of every single day, where we allow ourselves to lean into the realities of our world. And so the question that I leave you with for today is, what might help you relax into not knowing, into the uncertainties of life? What does help you to cope with that? The Israelites needed to figure out how to deal with this system around the manna, of having trust that the next day there would be food for them, and slowly gaining that trust. One other piece, just going back to the text that we learned a few minutes ago, is this idea of the Omer, right? There's this Omer of manna that everyone is supposed to collect for themselves. That's how much they eat in a given day. So we might ask, okay, what connection does that Omer, does that specific unit of measurement have to do with the counting of the Omer that we are taking part in right now? And there are two answers to that I'm going to offer. One is that the Omer was a unit of measurement that related to barley, that related to wheat. And on Shavuot, it was a harvest holiday around these things. And so there is this connection through that. But on a more spiritual level, an Omer is something that the Israelites had to measure consistently every single day throughout their wanderings in the desert. We too have come together every single day throughout this journey, from Passover until we receive the Torah on Shavuot, in the spiritual exercise of preparing ourselves for receiving Torah, of allowing ourselves space and time in the midst of what might be a very, very busy day to do the spiritual work and reflection that we need to do so that we are ready to receive Torah. This Omer is a small piece, a small amount of time that we put aside to take care of ourselves, to push ourselves to grow spiritually and to grow emotionally, to be ready for Shavuot. And so, in this way, the two pieces are linked as well. Each morning, I like to end with a Mishaberach prayer. Excuse me. And we say this prayer for everyone in our world, everyone in our hearts who is in need of any kind of healing, be it emotional, be it physical. So I invite you to join with me in singing Debbie Friedman's Mishaberach prayer. Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Lehimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lehavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. At 10 a.m. today, I invite you to join Chaplain Bonnie Leopold as she does sound healing. And tonight we will have services at 7 p.m. and I look forward to seeing you there. Please also keep in mind that we are going to have another Torah on and off the trails. And this week of Earth Day, it feels like a perfect fit. So I hope that you can join, whether it's from a trail that you love, from your backyard, or even from your kitchen table. I look forward to seeing everyone as we continue our counting of the Omer and for all of these opportunities in the days ahead. Have a great day.